What do we have today, Brett?
So look, I think the topic for us to talk about today, and we're going to put a timer on us today, so we're going to see if we can do a 30-minute real talk, is this concept of when you need to get something done, maybe really quite quickly, where you need to influence or persuade in a situation, and you need to do it quickly, but you've got no authority. You can't kind of call out your role and say, I want this. That's not going to work. And I thought maybe we could unpick a little bit. How do you kind of influence with no authority and persuade with no authority at pace?
Yeah, this is a fascinating subject because we meet these situations every day when you think about this. So you might be talking about, getting a paper at some, administrative office in front of the clerk there, but you need something now, but they don't need to give it to you right now. Right? They're not necessarily obliged to. Or you are working with a colleague and you need them to help you with something, but you're not their manager and you also don't really have any authority over them in any way. So how can you still get what you need from them? And there are, there are millions of examples like this, and surely I would say easily a dozen of those in each of our lives in every single day, if we just, look for those. So one of the ways I think that people are trying to get through this situation, they would be getting in front of that clerk, for example, and would be saying, I need to have this certification today. And this would be your request. And the person on the other side would just be thinking, you're going to get it next week, right? So that is a situation where this person really has some room in helping you right now or later. It will be completely without consequences for them. Now, one of the things, let me just say, and you probably have seen this also, is the moment you start to be mean or too aggressive to someone who could hurt you by doing nothing, that's exactly what they're going to do. So pressure doesn't work in this situation, not even psychological one. You can't go to the clerk and say, you know what, you're just a lazy idiot. I think you really should be doing this now. What is this person going to do?
I've seen that. Just when you're telling that story, I'm immediately transported back to Heathrow Airport. And I can still remember to this day, I just checked in and I was making sure that I was moving through, the alleys to the aisles for security. And I started to hear this guy shouting. And it was so interesting because he was obviously late for the flight, for the check-in. And the more he shouted, the more the individual behind the desk just shook her head. And you could see she probably had a little bit of flexibility. She could have maybe stamped his, pass to let him through, but he was getting so aggressive and it immediately turns people off. So my question to you is, how do you, in that moment of stress, when you need something, how do you move someone towards you? Because that's the skill I think you're talking about.
Yes, that's right. I think you need to take a little moment before you approach the situation and do a little bit of a cold read on what, emotions or feelings might the person that I'm going to approach now have towards me if I come with my request. So realizing that probably what I want is based on, often, it's based on my fault because I haven't been on time. Like, for example, it's not the other person's problem. And if I now just want them to book me on another flight for free, and ideally also into business class because, the wood class is already full, something like that, I will be the 100th person on that day that would approach, this person. So they might be stressed, they might be annoyed, they might be, if they just see me walking towards them, they're probably going to think, here comes the next idiot. Right. Am I really having another shitty day? So realizing this, doing this little bit of a cold read, what's probably on the mind of the other person is something that you can arm yourself with, and then you use that. In my opinion, you use that by diffusing those emotions the first thing you do, before you even ask what you want. Right? So what I would do, for example, in this situation is I would probably go to that desk, try to smile, try to be friendly, but the first thing I would say is I would actually say what is probably on her mind. I would say, you have probably been, seeing me walk up here and thinking, here comes the next guy who has an unreasonable request.
Yeah. So like deprecating yourself.
Yes, right. So I'm just going to say that. And this gives, and I have to be silent a little bit afterward. I need to give it a pause, because this is a little bit surprising for the other person, and it takes a little while for this sentence to land in the mind of the other person. So that is really the diffusing these emotions, because people are 6 times more likely, Brett, I don't know if you knew that, 6 times more likely to deal with you if they like you. And 6 times more is a lot.
I might have a problem there.
Yeah. If you will be the one shouting, you will be.
I need to do some work on myself. But okay, so so you diagnose as you approach, and then you diffuse.
Yeah.
What happens next? Because you still haven't got your way, right? You're still just telling a story.
Yes, that's right. But with this, first of all, I need to get it out of the way. Or let me say, I need to eliminate what could potentially stand in the way of the person liking me enough so that they even feel like wanting to help me. If I don't have authority over someone, the only reason why they would help me is because they feel like it.
Right.
At least if I want them to help me, a little bit out of the ordinary. If I have a very, very simple request and just ask them where's the gate for something, they're just going to tell me. That's not the hard part. If I want them to book me on a flight that because I've missed my other one, and they don't have to do that, they need to feel like wanting to help me. So first of all, this diffusing, that's why it's very important. So there's a chance that they feel like wanting to help me. After that, you can probably state your situation, not with long-winded excuses, not with any criticism towards the other person or the company that they work for or something like that. No long-winded story. But I would say, because I've opened with saying, I'm probably one of those people that were approaching a desk where you say like, oh, now the next idiot is coming. Right. Yeah. And then you can say, the problem that I have created for myself is that I don't know anymore how I could possibly get my flight to New York. I'm making this up, right? So just stating your request, but as a challenge, is inviting the other person to help find a solution. That their solution is probably that it's probably possible for them to actually book you on another flight if they really want to. But I would not ask for that at this point, right? So I would rather state my problem as a challenge, hoping to have diffused some of the negative feelings before. Maybe I've even used humor. Maybe I've just approached them and saying, where do I submit my photo for idiot customer of the month? Something like that. Maybe this is something to, unsettle people a little bit away from what they might be thinking about you. And then stating your situation and formulating it a little bit as a challenge, I think is a wonderful next step, Brett. Have you ever tried something like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking how I've used it when, and again, airports come to mind, right?
Right.
And I remember being in Singapore at Changi Airport. I had been in Singapore for 28 hours, I'd flown in, done a workshop, and I was flying out again. No time on the ground except overnight to sleep and then the workshop. And as I approached the check-in, I said to the guy, I said, just have a look at my stamp of when I came in to Singapore. And he had a look and he went, oh, wow, you came in yesterday. I said, I know. And if there's any way you could help this tired old man get to sleep on the plane, he'd be very appreciative.
Yeah.
And that kind of way of positioning it. But I'm wondering, as it happens, he didn't help me. But I'm wondering if there's a way of asking them to help solve the problem. If that's another layer we could add to this, where you diagnose as you approach, you diffuse with some humor or some kind of self-deprecation, which highlights you're the one who's made the mistake, so you're owning it. I like that. And then maybe appealing to that nice part of their personality that genuinely wants to help. You know, they're in a customer service environment, for example, where it's like, hey, you know, or check their name, Frank, I wonder if there's any way you're able to help me here. And kind of showing that you are at their mercy, or maybe that's too weak a position to take, but I'm wondering if maybe asking for help is a nice layer as well as you pose the challenge and the problem that you've got.
I agree, Brad. And the reason why this is actually could work is because if you are asking your, someone's help, and ask them to help solve your problem somehow, or at least give you advice on how to solve the problem, what you do is actually you express that you trust that they have the competence, first of all, but also that you personally trust them to give you some sort of advice or help. And then I think subconsciously for a lot of people, this law of reciprocity comes in again. So this person seems to put a lot of trust in me. Maybe it's appropriate for me to trust him back a little bit also. Mm-hmm. And this, although it's a very fragile and maybe even slightly shallow degree of trust that you may be able to establish, it is still going to be the fundament for you to assert any kind of influence over the other person over the course of the conversation that's going to follow. Because people don't like listen, they don't listen to people, as I said, if they don't feel like helping you. And feeling like helping you is said they need to somehow, I don't know you a bit, trust you a bit, and even if it's just this little tiny bit. So if, for example, in the situation you would have asked something along the lines of, I am, as you can see, I have maneuvered myself into some sort of terrible impasse right now. Do you see any way of how I could get out of that situation? Right? Or I really don't understand much about the processes and possibilities that exist in this whole aerospace arena. But you seem to be an expert in this. Do you have any advice for me what I could do next? Something like that.
And I like that, because when you engage with people, and we've talked about this on a previous Real Talk when we talked about intimacy and trust, it's that way of building some intimacy between you and the other person that elevates the relationship beyond the moment. And it's, it's a transient moment that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I can think of, my son's at university, he has to get finance for university. And we filled the forms in a little bit late. So how do we make sure we get the funding on time so he doesn't go without money when he goes to university? And you can imagine what it's like to call a student finance body, and you spend 4 hours waiting in the queue before you speak to somebody. So already your blood pressure is boiling a little bit. And then you get on the phone and their automatic response is, no, can't help. You're late, the form is late. And these kinds of techniques, I think, are really helpful, because what you're doing is, in a way, Frank, if I interpret what you're saying, is you're appealing to the ego a little bit. You're saying, look, you're the one with the power here. You're the one with the knowledge. You're the one with the ability to say yes or no. I'm here standing in front of you and saying, look, I'm an idiot. I need your help. Please help me. And I bet if you take that approach, you'd be 1 out of 100 people who's taken that approach, as opposed to the approach of, you must help me. I'm really important.
I'm within my rights.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've paid for a ticket or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering though, with this this way of kind of developing the relationship, what about for people who aren't so confident in communication? They're not so confident in expressing warmth or that kind of friendliness without even knowing people. You know, the more introverted people, the more introverted behaviors. Because everything you've said to me so far, I'm like, yeah, if I'm naturally extroverted and I'm okay doing that, yeah, I can be preparing what I'm going to say as I walk towards the desk, diagnose, diffuse, ask for help, share the problem, like ask them to be sympathetic with me. But what about if I'm quite quiet, if I'm not really a talker? What about for me then? How easy is it just to speak up in the way you're describing?
Yeah, look, Brett, I think actually that's good news for people who are not necessarily a talker or not so extrovert, because if you think about this, you don't have to do much talking. You only have to think about probably the 1 or 2 things that you're going to say and the kind of attitude with which you want to show up. That's all. The other person is doing most of the work if you do that right. So I think it's completely appropriate and sufficient for you to maybe memorize a few of those phrases that you could use in situations like this. Maybe even write them down on your notepad or something like that, and you pull them out when you need them. It's not too hard to comprehend, and I don't think there's much talking needed.
Mm.
You don't have to convince. It's not like you have to sell something to someone, you know, like in a fact-based presentation or something like that, right? You don't have to know stuff. The only thing that you need, you may have wanted to have some, you know, smart formulations for, you know, a self-accusation, for example, or for how do I ask for help? 2 or 3, put them in a notepad. There's enough inspiration for you to, you know, to take out whenever you need it. I don't think it's too hard.
I like the idea of like, so far you've given me like 3 Ds already, like diagnose, diffuse, desire. What happens if after all of this, they still say no?
Yeah, this could happen. So here's the thing. So let's say, I think this is a more likely example. Let's say you have purchased a product at an electronics store, for example, and you want to return the product because you don't like it, or doesn't matter really the reason, or it's broken. So, but you don't have the receipt anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you go back into that supermarket and you want to return the product, but the policy of the supermarket is that no returns without the original receipt. Very common. Now, if you happen to be approaching a junior salesperson who really is at the bottom of the decision-making hierarchy in this supermarket, there is no way for him, even if he feels like wanting to help you, to make that decision on his own or her own.
Yeah.
No way. You might inspire them to say something like, I know this must be completely against your policy. Is there any way you could call your supervisor for me so I can ask him an important question? Something like that. He might be finding the courage to do that, but you can't expect something unreasonable just as much as you probably cannot suspect if you've been caught crossing, a red light with your car and you're caught by the police. You may not be able to persuade them to let you go, because they can't just risk doing that most of the time. Right.
Yeah,
but maybe the reasonable expectation that you may be able to negotiate in a smart way is that maybe they give you, because very often they have some leeway of how much the ticket is going to be, is for them to decide to give you, a lower ticket. So that would be a reasonable hope to have. But if you go to the person in the supermarket and you want to return a product without a receipt and they have no say, that's the wrong guy. So I think if somebody tells you, no, it's not possible, but you feel that there's at least some degree of understanding or sympathy for your situation, maybe you can ask them to get you in touch with the next person. That would be my best bet, I would say, in this situation.
So in that moment, there seems to me a little balance here between when we're trying to influence somebody, and normally that's for a big decision, or when you're trying to persuade someone to like move a little bit for you. And I suppose it depends a lot on the rules of engagement. In the example of the receipts, stores will have a policy, and some people will bend a little bit, some will have the ability to bend, others won't be brave enough to bend. And then again, it goes back to this idea of, if you have that level of created intimacy, where you've been able to build an instant relationship in that moment, where neither of you will remember each other's names, but you'll both tell the story when you go home after work. Oh, I had this guy come into work today, he didn't have the receipt. Do you know what? He was so polite, he was so friendly, he was telling jokes, and actually we ended up helping him. You could imagine, if you play it right, it becomes a story that both of you play, because you go home and you say, oh wow, you know what? I found someone who really helped today.
Yeah.
And maybe the next time you're in the store, you acknowledge them again. I think if we take this into the workplace, there's something interesting here, because you mentioned before the law of reciprocity. And this comes up a lot, I think. When you're trying to influence without authority at work, the law of reciprocity, I believe, is your best friend.
Yes, absolutely.
Because then I think you can go to somebody and you can diagnose, diffuse, desire, but you can also offer something in return. Because in those other examples, at the airport, at the store, you've got nothing to offer, right? You're totally at their mercy.
Yes.
But at work, in a cross-functional team, in a project team, in just a business, there must be something I can do for you at some point where you can call in the favor.
Yeah.
Listen, help me out, Frank. I could really do with your support here, and you can call on me when you need anything.
Precisely.
And
Brad.
I think that law of reciprocity becomes more valuable.
Yeah, and you know what? The thing is, of course, you're wise to proactively and even preemptively cast a net of positive influence with the people around you long before you ever need it. Right? So giving something to someone that's of value for them without expecting anything in return is a very, very powerful way of establishing relationships that at one point you might be able to call on. And if you don't do that just tactically, but if that's a general habit or behavior of yourself, then I think you will start to effectively build amazing reputation and relationships over time, which will make using influence for achieving something or getting something that you need so much more easy. And let's be honest, it's not necessarily about a huge time investment on your part. What is something of value that you could give to someone without expecting anything in return? It could be simply being a little bit attentive and sharing maybe a piece of information that would be really useful for the other person in a particular moment. It could be giving them some words of encouragement if they feel a little bit insecure about their upcoming, executive meeting presentation. It's a wide variety of things that you could deploy that have value for the other person that are zero effort for you. Very powerful, this kind of behavior.
I think this, for me, what you're highlighting here is actually the influence without authority model, this idea that, you know, we all have a currency. And the model itself, by two guys, Bradford Cohen, they talk about the fact that in every situation, you must look for your allies. Everybody is a potential ally.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to find that ally, you must diagnose the situation and find out what is the currency that they trade in. And when you know what their drivers are, what would motivate them, what could help them, maybe it's introducing them to other people in the business relationship, so bringing them to meetings. Maybe it's, you know, getting them involved in a task that, you know, they'll really like because it's their passion or their talent. Or maybe it's getting them on board on something that really inspires them because you know that it's one of their key drivers. If you can do this, so this is not because you're trying to do something to get it back later, you're genuinely interested in what drives them, then you can build influence in the moment by having worked at influence in the relationship in the months before.
Yes, and that's exactly how it works. But here's one thing I think that some people I have observed in the past, I'm not going to say any names, where I'm just saying they did it wrong because they've been too tactical about who they're hanging out with and who they're dealing with, you know, maybe giving favors or something like that. So if you're too tactical about only being friendly or kind or helpful with people of influence, there are two problems with this. One, there's a big difference between being kind and curious about people and shameless brown nosing. And the latter, everyone sees. And it's one of the most despicable behaviors in the eyes of people if they see something like that happening. Have you ever met someone who was engaging in this kind of behavior, who had a good reputation in, you know, among the staff? I did not.
No.
It's
no,
so,
and
so obvious.
yeah, from the moment they walk towards you,
Yes.
or they email you,
I
you
get
already
goosebumps right now when you say that.
right. But you know, it's interesting. I remember watching a video. I can't remember which thought leader it was. They were talking about how order is really important, and by talking about order being important, it's the order in which you ask for things. So I don't know if you get these emails a lot, but I see them sometimes on LinkedIn where people are asking and requesting for you to vote for their team to win some award.
Right.
And I get the odd email from people that, you know, I haven't heard from in ages, asking me how I am, you know, hope business is okay. It's been a long time since we spoke. They see I'm doing well. And it's like, blah, 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 blah. And then like the last line is, oh, by the way, could you vote for my team so we can win 5,000 euros of? And it's like, that's not the right way round.
Well, at least they made some effort of warming you up to them. But you tell me, what would have worked?
So for me, what would have worked would have been, hey, Brad, how are you? I know it's been a long time since we've spoken. I'm actually asking for some help. My team's up for an award, and if you click the link below, it would be really great because we'd be put forward and get more votes. I can see from looking at your LinkedIn, things are going well. It would be great to catch up at some point if you've got time. Feel free to ping me. It will always be nice to hear from you.
Yes, this is a big difference, isn't it? You know, somebody with no sneakiness in their approach. And actually, they also did a little bit of a self-accusation, didn't they, in your example? You know, we're saying, look, I haven't been in touch for such a long time, I know, but I really would like to get some help with, you know, getting this reward or something like that. It's way more acceptable than the other way, which you feel is sneaky.
Correct.
Right.
And that for me is, you know, and the way my mind works, order is important. And if you get the order right, so in the way that you were talking before, you diagnose, and when you're diagnosing, you then sort of deprecate yourself, right? You just sort of diffuse the situation before you let them know what you actually want. And then you have a conversation. So there's like this way of setting up the conversation first before you just dive in and get all stressed out because what you want, you think you're not going to get. And actually, maybe part of this is acknowledging you know, we don't get what we want all the time. And sometimes even the best techniques, they don't work, Frank.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, by the way, you mentioned that you asked earlier, what if, you know, despite all your good efforts, the other person is still not helping you? They still say no. As I said, one reason could be that they just don't have the leeway to help you with your request, but it could also be that they just don't want to yet. And that is a really clearly a sign for you that the relationship that you have with the person is not at the level that you need it to be for them to want to help you. In the situation where you're in front of, I don't know, some counter at the airport, you have no opportunity to, or very little I can think of, that you can move this situation along. But at the workplace is very different. So you might, let's say, for example, I have an idea of an investment that I want my general manager to make. For this, I need, I don't know, 5 new headcount. And I have my reasons and my ideas and so on why I want to do this. So I try what I can to, you know, be positively persuasive and so on. They still say no. So with this, I need to realize, okay, at one point, I can't keep asking the same stuff. I become way too annoying. I need to take the long road. And the long road often leads to getting a relationship with the people that have influence over my target person.
Mm-hmm.
I need to have some degree of allies that help me make my case, that help me, I don't know, the person that actually needs to say yes to my request, to have another look, a fresh look, maybe with a different perspective on what I wanted. So that's a long road that you can take, but the mechanisms are still the same. If you start to approach and build relationships, trust-based relationships with the people around, influential people around the person whose yes you need, you still need to use the same tools and mechanisms. You still have to, you know, build some degree of trust. You can, you still need to be sure that you're likable to some degree in the eyes of the other people, because everybody can just simply say no.
I know you're right. I know you're right. Oh, look.
Yeah.
That's the alarm saying 30 minutes. Let me pause it. Or maybe we've come full circle already. Because I think when I'm listening to you, what I hear is actually the tools work, whether you're playing the long game or the short game. Actually, it starts with you being able to just read that situation well enough to prepare how you're going to diffuse it before launching into what it is you want in this very open, honest, transparent way, and then appeal to them to help you in this situation. And it's by creating that element of swift trust with them in that moment that could make them just tilt the balance of the scales to say, do you know what? I want to help this guy.
Yeah.
I want to help this guy. Frank, I think this is a really interesting one. I think influence anyway is a topic that whether you're currently working or you're trying to influence, you know, we look at the governments around the world today trying to influence their people to live in a certain way and do a certain sort of behavior with COVID and everything. I think it's really interesting to see the difference and impact it would have if they were a bit more humble about it, because that's the lesson I'm taking from you. We need a bit of humility when we need things from others, and it's that humility that can engage the other person to want to help us.
That's great. I hope we have, you know, inspired people a little bit with wanting to know more a little bit about this subject and start to hone their influencing skills a little bit.
I love it.
Thank you,
Frank, always a pleasure. Real Talk next week. Tune in. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.